Hello, welcome once again to the weekly edition of the Wrap. I'm Travis Fain, one of WRAL's state government reporters.
And I'm Brian Murphy, I guess one of WRAL's other state government reporters.
Yeah, Murphy is you're supposed to write about sports, right?
I've been dragged into a lot.
That's what happens. That's what happens when we talk about gambling a lot, which we'll get to. I think the biggest news of this week was we think we're going to have a vote on the budget mid-September. That's what the Speaker of the House said, and I think we believe the timetable this time. Is that right?
Yeah, this is also what happens when your part-time legislature is still trying to pass a budget in mid-September. Speaker Moore said he expects votes on September 12th, 13th, and 14th. I think that's right. I mean, it sounds like they are negotiating things like if me and you each put in, me as a member of the Senate, you as a member of the House, each put in $1 million for some fire station rather than have $2 million for the fire station. They're going through and kind of working through the duplicates and things like that. So seems like they're at the end point. Of course, and we can talk about it later, but casinos, we still don't have a resolution on that. The NC Innovate, we still don't necessarily have a solution on that. So there are some big ticket items that still remain.
Yeah, and those are the things that we've heard for some time that are kind of keeping things from moving forward is like infrastructure money, which is a nice word for port projects in a lot of cases, and NC Innovation, which is the $1.4 billion this group wants to help colleges, universities around the state, help researchers get their turn ideas into job-producing products and companies. And then, of course, gambling. Donnie Lambeth, who, by the way, is of course, a House budget writer, he was on WRAL this week. He also said, look, expect the budget to be done sometime around Labor Day with votes to follow pretty quickly. And he was speaking in the context of Medicaid expansion, which continues to be delayed and tied to a budget passing. But he was saying he thinks that, even if it isn't till mid-September when we get this thing done, and we have blown by a September 1st deadline that DHHS had put on things, that we can still get Medicaid expansion going. I think it was an October 1st deadline. Now the dates are starting to mix me up a little bit here.
There was a thought that if it didn't pass by September 1st, then they couldn't launch it until December 1st. It sounds like Lambeth thinks they might be able to get it launched by October 1st, even though they didn't hit the September 1st deadline.
And DHHS pushed back a little bit on that, a good bit on that, and they said, no, we need it by September 1st. But if that doesn't happen, a new launch date will be announced following the needed legislative action. So they're not saying definitely no, but, it doesn't sound – I don't know. I guess at some point you wonder how real deadlines are, but when you're dealing with the federal government, which has to sign off on a bunch of stuff for Medicaid expansion to actually go through, deadlines are usually pretty real.
And this, we talk about these things as though they're sort of, out there topics, like, but this really affects people's lives. There are people who are unable to get Medicaid who will be qualified for Medicaid expansion, but now they're having to live either whether it's 1 month or 2 months or 3 months without that health insurance. So the consequences of what is happening in Raleigh really does have real world effects on the people of North Carolina.
Right. It's like being told, all right, we got together and on a bipartisan basis, we decided the best thing for the state of North Carolina is to give you free health insurance, but not yet because we don't know how many casinos we want. Like that's a weird
Right. Or we can't agree on how much to cut taxes.
Right.
And so if you're a citizen of North Carolina and you think you're going to get this Medicaid expansion, for it not to happen and not to this passed way back in March and April.
Right.
For it not to happen, now we're looking at talking about possibly December. That's got to be frustrating to some people.
Yep.
Including the governor.
Yeah, the governor has said several times, look, let's decouple these things. Let's just move forward with Medicaid expansion. Republicans not going to do that. Rockingham County, their county commission met on Monday night. Packed house. There was like 7 different overflow rooms, probably the best attended Rockingham County Commission meeting in decades. They took a unanimous vote, despite the crowd being against it, to rezone 192 acres to make way for a casino plus entertainment district. So casino, hotel, restaurants, all the things that would kind of grow up around a casino. But yeah, definitely going to be a casino under the current plan if the legislature authorizes it. That's
and you were at that meeting.
I was.
That's what democracy in action.
All 5 commissioners voted for it, despite every speaker except for the lawyer representing Cordish, which is a major casino developer which wants to clearly build there, even though they're not using the word casino. Cordish isn't. That's clearly the plan. So they voted against the crowd, but the Rockingham County commissioners, including Kevin Berger, who is the son of Senate Republican leader Phil Berger, who is pushing for casinos to be legalized further in the state, including this one, making the point that, hey, this is a red county. Didn't we used to be in favor of property rights here? Didn't we used to say that, hey, if you want to use your property this way or that way, the government shouldn't tell you? So there are a lot of arguments like that from commissioners. And also this part of Rockingham County, it's next to a camp for kids with special needs, Camp Carefree. So that's kind of a big deal to put a casino next to it. But it's also along US 220, which is turning into Interstate 73 over whatever timetable the federal government might have. And it's always been kind of looked at as, all right, we're gonna put jobs here. This is part of Rockingham County's long-term plan, is to have jobs here. This is, I don't know, something like 1,000 jobs or something. They always promise some figure. So those were the arguments that the county commissioners made.
Senator Berger is in favor of this, pushing it, I would argue, to some degree. Speaker Moore came out and said he's in favor of it. He also said that Mark Walker, who I guess at that meeting had insinuated that maybe only 25% of the GOP House caucus was in favor of casinos, this bill, this proposed legislation. Tim Moore said, no, that's not true. That an initial count he found way higher than 25%, would not say if it's 50%. But I also think the fact that Rockingham County was willing to, the commissioners were willing to vote against all of the people there and not delay the vote, not say, hey, we'll take this up later. We don't even have any legislation. I mean, all the signs point to this really getting done, if you ask me.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, it's going to be, what does the House Republican caucus do on it? It's one thing for the speaker to say, oh, it's got pretty good. Okay, well, the bill still hasn't really been made public.
Right.
You're welcome to produce something in writing that we don't have to kind of get. Because, WRAL, we have published the bill as it was proposed some time ago. It would be interesting to see. First of all, you're talking to a guy who thinks House and Senate caucuses ought to be open. I think that's where the decisions are being made. And I think for the good of the public, that they ought to be open. But I'm getting off on,
Well, what we have not seen is the VLT bill. We've seen at least some draft legislation around the casino bill, and this is the rural tourism districts. And you can make an argument, I think, about economic growth, job opportunities when you're talking about these casino districts, these rural districts. The VLTs, that you really can't make that same argument. These are video slot machines, basically, that would end up in bars and restaurants and convenience stores. And Speaker Moore threw out the number of $1 billion in potential revenue. That is coming from people voluntarily playing these games, which is another way of saying from likely North Carolinians who are hoping for a big payday and may find themselves disappointed. To me, there's less of that economic argument around VLTs than there are around casinos, and that may help explain why we haven't seen that bill yet.
Yeah, but it is a lot of money, and as you try to fund tax cuts, anytime you start using billion with a B, you're talking real money, and it would be tens of thousands of locations, though, bars, restaurants, gas stations around the state, where, you probably walk in now and see these video poker machines and people just sitting there in a gas station at 1 p.m. and think, ooh, I don't know, do we want more of that? But we might. Moving on to the governor's race a little bit, there's a new group out calling itself CARE, the Coalition Against Mark Robinson's Extremism. I think this may be the third or fourth group that calls itself CARE in the state. I feel like there were a lot of I guess now that we've passed Medicaid expansion, more or less, the acronym is available, maybe. They held a press conference in downtown Raleigh, just blasting the lieutenant governor based on his views on education. The Huffington Post also ran a story this week. This was the headline on the Huffington Post story about Mark Robinson. And I quote, "The bonkers conspiracy theorist running for North Carolina governor." They looked at a bunch of Facebook posts that continue to be available online. Have you ever seen, Murph, someone who is running for state office who has all this crazy conspiracy stuff on their Facebook page who didn't scrub it?
Well, yes. Well, I mean, we've seen this with first-round picks in sports who suddenly have to apologize or maybe don't even sign after either racist remarks or other remarks are found on social media. It is a good reminder that if you're going to be in the public eye, you should probably scrub your social media, even if you're not sure what's in there. Mark Robinson knows what's in there. I mean, Mark Robinson discussed paying for an abortion for his then girlfriend, now wife, on Facebook.
Yeah.
And that's how it came to light that he had, paid for an abortion. As a staunch pro-life conservative, and that obviously made news cycles. You would think he knows that stuff is out there on Facebook. Better to get rid of it. I don't think he's running away from it is the problem. Or not the problem, but I don't think he's running away from it.
He doesn't seem to be. There was one that Huffington Post put out there, and of course I'd seen a lot of these before. We've been reporting on this for years at this point. But one from 2015 where he suggests American Idol and Chopped, these shows where it's some sort of competition, there's a panel judging you, that they are precursors to show trial executions like a Stalin might have had. And then this is the line that killed me. This is the line that absolutely killed me. I'm quoting the Lieutenant Governor of North Carolina here. Of course, no one is being killed, but all the elements are still there. No. You know what element's not there? The murder. The murder's not there.
You mean the dessert basket is different somehow than show trials? I mean, this is how reality competition television works. It has worked for decades and decades now.
And the argument that he was seriously making, because he goes back and forth with the woman in the comments to make sure he makes his point, is that he has some suspicion that reality television is to prepare the American society for show trials that will have, I guess, televised executions involved for having the wrong politics.
I thought reality television was there to condition the American public to have a reality television star run for president and then win the presidency.
Oh, wow. You just blew my mind, man. You blew the lid off this thing. I have to wonder, though, like, there doesn't seem to be a line with Mark Robinson where, I mean, some Republicans aren't fans of his, but there just doesn't seem to be a line where it's like, all right, now we're not doing this. This is no longer plan A.
Well, let's be fair to the lieutenant governor. Since he has announced his campaign for governor, he has tried to, I think, throttle some of that back. He's not been leading with it, whereas maybe during his campaign for lieutenant governor, he was sort of leading with this stuff. He has sort of tried, I think, to be quieter, a little more diplomatic, seems to have tweaked his position on abortion a little bit, moderated it a little bit. But yes, until all this stuff is gone from the internet, and it's never going to be gone from the internet, there are going to be stories popping up. I estimated between now and the election, which again isn't until November of 2024, 500 stories about Mark Robinson's conspiracy theories. Not from WRAL or the News and Observer, but when around the country, everyone's going to latch onto this.
Right.
500 stories is that seem like a reasonable number of stories we're going to get about this stuff?
I wouldn't use the word reasonable in this conversation, but it doesn't seem unlikely. So, yeah. All right. Speaking of the governor's race, State Supreme Court Justice Michael Morgan announced this week that he'd be stepping down early. He had already said he would not be seeking re-election to the state Supreme Court. He's being kind of coy about why he's stepping down early, but I think he had previously also said he was mulling a run for governor. It all kind of lines up that, hey, Michael Morgan, who is one of two Democrats on the state Supreme Court right now, is probably going to join the governor's race at some point soon, meaning Josh Stein will not be the anointed candidate. He will have to win a primary. There will be another candidate. I don't know how much of a needle mover Michael Morgan. I mean, it's not like the public just knows their state Supreme Court justices, but it is looking, and not yet confirmed, that like we will have an actual Democratic primary for governor, maybe.
There's another benefit to this, right? If you're a Democrat, then you get a Democrat appointed by Roy Cooper to the state Supreme Court,
right?
And then they can run as an incumbent instead of an open primary. And maybe they can, whoever it is, can build up some sort of name recognition as they go into an open contest in 2024.
Yeah, because I mean, the Democrats are just desperate to hold at least some some foundation on the state Supreme Court to where in the coming years, and I do mean many years, because Republicans are going to hold the majority on that court.
Through at least 2028. And there is no chance, no matter what happens, if Democrats win every seat that ever comes available on the state Supreme Court, they cannot take the majority until at least 2028.
Because of the way the terms are staggered,
right.
But you can't be losing seats either. You can't be putting that even further into the future.
Right. Every loss kicks that number to 2032 or 2034. So
as for Morgan's replacement on the bench, don't know. The governor will, as you said, make that appointment. The governor said on Thursday he would make it soon. He also said, and I thought this was a little interesting, he said, well, we just found out today that Justice Morgan was stepping down from the bench. So, which I found out the same day. So the governor saying that he and I and the rest of the public discovered that Justice Morgan's planned to step down early here on the same day. So not something that was workshopped ahead of time if you take everybody at face value, which, of course, we do in this business. House Bill 488 deals with building codes. I believe last week the legislature overrode the governor's veto on this. Liz McLaughlin here at WRAL covers a lot of climate change and environmental issues for us. She had a piece that I would recommend you read on it. It freezes building codes, or freezes a bunch of residential building codes, including, and it also includes a ban on what's called sheathing inspections. Have you ever heard of a sheathing inspection?
I have not, but now I'm worried about it.
You should be, it sounds like. So this is stuff that helps your house withstand hurricane force winds. And we would still do these inspections, it sounds like, in the coastal areas, but at some point in interior where you can still have really heavy winds, we would no longer require that. The law also freezes energy efficiency upgrades that could have been in the building code. This is, again, part of the push and pull between what builders want, which is the ability to build housing cheaper with less government intrusion. Affordable housing policies, which are, I mean, that's not a right or a left thing at this point, like affordable housing policies. And I mean, there are only so many ways to make a house more affordable. And safety and environmental concerns. So this bill is part of that push and pull, and it was House Bill 488, which the governor vetoed and which has been overridden. Speaking of overrides.
Everything's being overridden.
Yeah, everything that the governor's veto in this session is.
Right. I think it's 14 for 14 so far.
And it'll be 15 for 15 soon, because the governor vetoed an elections bill this week, 747, which is the one that makes a whole bunch of changes. I don't feel the need to break those down. I mean,
the most interesting part of that veto was that Governor Cooper basically came out and said what maybe Democratic operatives say all the time, but he put it out there for everyone to see. He said, Republicans really don't want young people to vote. Republicans really don't want college students to vote. And if you're black and brown, Republicans really don't want you to vote either. Tim Moore said those are false statements, and if you can't argue the bill on the merits, then you throw out outrageous statements like that. But I thought it was interesting that Cooper, lame duck in the last years of his term here in North Carolina, to put it all out there. Say, basically, that's calling Republicans racist, basically.
Right. And he did a video, too,
right,
which is a little unusual, not surprising in this case. But, I mean, he is obviously trying to make the case that, hey, if you're young, black, brown, any number of qualifiers there, you should vote for Democrats. So, also this week at 512, the legislature overrode the governor's veto. That's the governor vetoed 512, and the override is to come. I know we all know how this movie ends.
It ends in court. It probably ends at the state Supreme Court, which is what we just talked about.
Right. just to bring it all full circle. So this is a bill that changes the way various important boards and commissions are appointed, including the Utilities Commission. At one point, the Utilities Commission had been dropped from the bill. It's back in there as it was finalized. That commission, which sets electricity rates, would go from 7 people, all appointed by the governor, to 5. 3 appointed by the governor, 2 by the General Assembly. If you're like, well, why didn't the General Assembly give themselves a majority? It's probably because of a previous court precedent that indicates the governor, in order to fulfill his constitutional duty of implementing the law, has to be able to appoint at least a majority of seats on a bunch of boards.
The good answer to all the questions of why didn't they go further is usually that they didn't think that could win in court.
Right.
But the changes that they did make, they do think can win in court. And both Moore and Berger said this week or last week, they expect a lawsuit, and they expect to win that lawsuit, or at least they think that favorable state Supreme Court may give a ruling that is more favorable to the legislature than they've gotten previously.
And open the door to any number of things. I mean, they're basically saying, yeah, please file a lawsuit. Please let us open this precedent back up.
And that's where you have a decision to make if you're Roy Cooper or you're the Democrats. Do we want to bring this all the way to the state Supreme Court and establish a precedent that is not conducive to the executive or not conducive to the Democrats at this point?
Yeah.
Maybe someday it will be, but do you risk overturning all that old precedent by bringing another lawsuit?
Yeah. Other boards impacted here: Economic Investment Committee, they do like business grants. Environmental Management Commission, important. Commission for Public Health, Coastal Resources Commission, Wildlife Resources Commission, North Carolina Railroad Board of Directors. Did you know that the state of North Carolina owns a railroad? Like, this is an actual company owned by the state that has a railroad.
I did not.
They do. UNC Health System Board of Directors, Board of Governors. They changed, I believe, just the election method on the Board of Governors. They were talking about adding seats.
Yeah, Tim Moore wanted to add seats, has instead decided just to add seats to the NC State Board and the UNC Board because, if you remember, a couple of years ago, they shrunk the Board of Governors. And now Tim Moore wants to reverse that. His argument was about geographic diversity, getting more people from different parts of the state on those boards.
Right.
And so by having more seats, you can do that. That was the argument he made.
Right, sure. Also in the bill, the full Board of Transportation would be replaced. So the bill says that everybody on the Board of Transportation now, their term would end. I think it was June 30th. I can't remember the date, but it's already passed. So immediately. But again, this is all going to be held up, presumably by a lawsuit. The governor vetoing the bill on Thursday, I think it was. And I guess we'll see an override in mid-September. We will also at some point see a veto on 749. This is the other voting bill.
And I believe he vetoed that last night or on Thursday night.
On Thursday. Not 749, but the 512, which is the
right. Sorry.
Powers bill. 749 has not yet passed the General Assembly, but it tinkers with the State Board of Elections and how it's named. This has also been the subject of a lawsuit. Also will be the subject of a lawsuit once the General Assembly finishes the bill and the governor vetoes it, and a lawsuit is filed. MV Realty, this is a company that our Five on Your Side team had looked at a good bit, and the Attorney General's office has an active investigation, and in fact, I think is in court against them today trying to get an injunction. But so this is a real estate company that comes to you and says, hey, sign all this paperwork. And what it says is, if you sell your house in the next 40 years, you have to use us as your real estate agent. And even if you don't, then you have to pay us 3%. And what the homeowner gets in return is some cash, hundreds of dollars, thousands of dollars. It's not a ton of cash, but it's some cash. And basically the legislature, on a widespread and bipartisan basis, decided that is predatory. They said they were, targeting old senior citizens. Senator Paul Lowe, who ain't no spring chicken himself, sorry, Senator, said his mother got a call about this. The real estate agents pushed back against this. The Attorney General was against it. And there was a signing ceremony for the bill that will outlaw this practice yesterday, Thursday, at the governor's mansion. Everybody real happy with that, except for MV Realty, who says it's not fair.
Of course.
Finally. Well, not finally. I guess we got more on this. Terrence Everett, did you read that letter that he wrote? Representative Terrence Everett wrote to Lauren Freeman, Wake County District Attorney?
I didn't read the letter, but I got the gist of it, which is he wanted a more formal investigation of the speaker over these allegations that the affair that the speaker has admitted to having played some sort of role, nefarious role, I guess, in who got jobs or who didn't get jobs in the state
government.
Because
the woman that he was having this relationship with was a state employee who got a bunch of raises. I think it was like $50,000 over several years, which she and the entity that gave her those raises said, no, it had nothing to do with the speaker. But Representative Everett wrote this letter to the DA. The DA, Lauren Freeman here in Wake County, had already said she didn't see anything criminal there. She had already said that publicly. But so I'm sure this is Representative Everett trying to get the story kind of back in the news, which I can't say I blame him. A Speaker of the House carrying on an affair with a state employee probably did cycle off the front page too quickly.
And there are court documents now filed that seem to indicate that maybe the story that we got, that the marriage had dissolved long before, sort of been called into question without studying the documents too much. I don't want to say, take a side on this, but we've talked about this in the past. I mean, the Speaker of the House being involved in an extramarital affair with a state employee and the allegations that were made by her then husband just sort of evaporated. Didn't like the Speaker just, was able to brush it off like he has many other allegations.
Well, and we should know that Tim Moore, the Speaker, is not married himself. He is divorced. The woman involved, she was somewhat estranged from her husband. I don't think that's in a lot of dispute. I mean, they kind of went back and forth about what the status of the relationship was, and consensual relationship too. The Speaker has skated on a lot of things. I mean, this is not the first time that Lauren Freeman, so the Wake County District Attorney,
she gets to handle a lot of stuff.
Well, that's the way because she's here in Raleigh. Like, if there's a question about a state politics, I can't quote you the chapter and verse, but it's her responsibility. And she before has cleared Moore in various things and said, I can't remember if it was the chicken plant that he bought and then sold for a lot of profit, or if it was. There have been a lot of things with the Speaker where she kind of came out and said, all right, this does not rise to a criminal prosecution, which I'm sure Republicans didn't care for much. And then she did push against Josh Stein, the Attorney General, her fellow Democrat, on a case where his campaign had put something that the other candidate said, well, that's not true, and the law in North Carolina says you can be criminally prosecuted for lying in a campaign commercial, which all of us were like, for real?
Since when?
You can? It was old law that apparently had not really seen much. So she did push that. So I kind of say all this to note Terrence Everett, the representative who wanted Lauren Freeman to investigate Tim Moore, tweeted after she said, nah, I ain't going to do that. Quote, so long as we have people willing to look the other way for political expedience, we're going to continue to have a North Carolina General Assembly that falls short of what NC families deserve. I would point out that Terrence Everett is an attorney. He lives in Wake County. He could have run against Lauren Freeman in 2022, and I guess could run against her in 2026. So
she's also the one who brought the charges against McCrae Dallas and that operation. So she's had her hand in a lot of political decisions, or political legal cases, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, that Wake County DA's position is a key one. I don't know that I've ever seen a lot of messaging as an election strategy around that aspect of it, as opposed to the law and order. Because, I mean, you would think it's a safe district attorney seat for any Democrat. So I don't know.
Well, of course, you'll deal with, and we'll discuss this in a second. If she does bring charges, then you deal with this whole weaponization of the justice system argument that comes up from many Republicans. And so that is a very difficult position where you're looking at cases against the Attorney General or looking at cases against the Speaker of the House and then trying to make decisions based on the law and politics and everything else that goes into it.
All right, let's run through a few quick ones. LGBTQ issues and Republicans. We were kind of surprised to get fundraising emails this week from Tom Tillis fundraising. He is a United States Senator, not a state senator, over a bill that was overridden. The governor's veto was overridden. There are a whole bunch of LGBTQ bills that the governor had vetoed and the legislature overturned and are now law. And Tillis is fundraising off of that. About like I'm way to go, North Carolina General Assembly. Tom Tillis, will always fight to protect North Carolina's youth. You should give my campaign some money. And I just think it's interesting that has become an issue that's animating enough to like take credit for things you didn't even do, to point those out.
Yeah, I mean, I think we saw this during the Republican convention here, or the GOP meeting, the GOP convention. Trump, got there and started talking about tax cuts and, golf clap. Started talking about LGBTQ issues, and the place went nuts. And Trump, say what you will about him, is very astute when it comes to what gets applause lines and what doesn't. Even remarked publicly that, hey, when I mentioned tax cuts, you guys didn't do anything. When I mentioned, LGBTQ stuff, you went nuts. Lots changed in 5 years.
Yeah, 5 years ago, you didn't even know what that was. So, I mean, he's just kind of standing there and telling you, like, okay, well, this is how I can motivate you. Good to know. Good to know.
Yeah, and I think we saw it a little bit in the debate. I mean, there was some talk about about economic issues but very pre-Trump talk about economic issues, like, hey, we got to cut the deficit and stuff. And even the moderators were like, well, you didn't really worry about that when Trump was president. But lots of talk about LGBTQ and women, biological men not playing women's sports. That stuff was more animating than some of the economic stuff.
Yeah, fear and anger as a motivator, you just never seem to go wrong, even if it is such a vanishingly small percentage of the American population, particularly when you talk about transgender folks, as to it's hard to see why it is such an animating issue, for me at least. Speaking of the former president, indicted for the fourth time, I believe, this week, along with North Carolinian Mark Meadows and Sidney Powell.
Sidney Powell, yep.
Yep. So there's a Republican connection, as always. They were indicted for the election shenanigans down in Georgia that were attempted. A lot of glowering in those mugshots, huh?
The part that, as you know, I covered Mark Meadows in Congress when he was a congressman from North Carolina, and gave up what would have been a safe seat, gave up a prominent position. I mean, he was the go-to, like, Freedom Caucus. You wanted to comment, you always went to Meadows. He was a go-to comment from all the press. So as powerful as one of 435 congressmen can be without being the speaker, he was pretty powerful. Gave all that up for 6-month run as Trump's chief of staff, and now a looming indictment, or an indictment in Georgia. And who knows what happened in the Jack Smith case up in D.C. There's a lot of talk that Meadows gave a lot of information to the Jack Smith investigation up there. So just to think he could have won that seat probably for the rest of his life, and is now embroiled in all this stuff. I wonder if he regrets that decision.
Yeah, but who could have foreseen that hitching your wagon to Donald Trump's star would have any sort of negative? Also gave us Madison Cawthorn.
Right. Well, not intentionally. That's the thing. Mark Meadows tried to grease the skids for a different candidate, and that got attention enough to give Madison Cawthorn a chance to win that seat.
All right, I got two other quick things. September 12th, the Wake County Republican Party is having I don't know if it's a debate or a forum, but they've invited candidates for governor. Bill LeMay moderating, according to the paperwork I've seen. Former Congressman Mark Walker, State Treasurer Dale Folwell, confirmed attendees. Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson listed as invited. I'm guessing that means not only that he's not confirmed, but that he will not be confirming. The invitation I saw didn't